What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Big Ten Football Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim. Big news update. This is episode 200. So, for all y'all who have been bearing with me, whether it's your first time or you have been listening to every single episode, special shout out to Chris and Jim Ebersol, who have been with me since day one. Special shout outs to a lot of you guys, Yankee, who you have been number one fan. Shout outs to the College Huddle, Big Ten Huddle, JR, Eric from the OHIO podcast, several of the other guys, Kurt from Sky U Pod, and there's so many I'm gonna forget. Kevin from Bruin Source, so many other guys that I'm gonna forget, and I'm sorry, but I am just so grateful. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Episode 200. Here we go. If this is your first time or you've been listening to the show but you haven't yet, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you're on YouTube, hit the follow button if you're on Spotify or on Apple, leave a review, leave a comment. You know, the more you do that, the more this show continues to get out there. So please do that. That'd be so great for me and for this channel as you get good content, hopefully reasonable and insightful in the Big Ten. Thank you. That's the start of this. Is thank you. We are going to recap week 4. We're going to recap week 4, and I'm going to start with the game I covered for the College Huddle, and that is Penn State, Kent State. There is an article on the College Huddle website, which I'll post down below, and I'll also post a couple of links to one to a short on YouTube and also to a 6-minute interview where I got to be with Drew Aller with some of the other reporters and beat writers at Penn State. But I'll start with just initial impressions. Penn State's freaking good. They're really good. And I know, caveat, it's Kent State. Kent State stinks. I get that. They've gotten dominated by everyone they've played, Pitt, Tennessee, and now Penn State. Penn State's really good. I know they didn't play well against Bowling Green. They were sleepwalking. Penn State, if they play up to their potential, they can win the Big Ten. Here are some of the things that really stood out to me. One, Drew Aller continues to improve. He continues to mature. The way he navigated the pocket, navigated pressure on Saturday, phenomenal. Just phenomenal. And a couple times he evaded pressure, was able to hit guys down the field, get big plays, which was a huge talking point in the offseason. Can Drew Aller hit his guys down the field? Does he have receivers that he can hit down the field? It wasn't Harrison Wallace, who was their big playmaker in week 1. It was Amari Evans. It was Liam Clifford. It was Julian Fleming, blast from the past, former Buckeye. All three of those guys had at least one reception of 35 yards plus in the pass game. And a lot of it was because of what Drew Aller was able to do with his legs to extend plays, the way he navigated the pocket, the way he made decisions. He was fantastic on Saturday. The defensive line dominated. They knocked out 2 quarterbacks, I believe, in the first half. They had no way to get the anything going. Run game, pass game. Their best play was a quarterback keeper, and that just got their second quarterback knocked out. It was a demolition on Saturday from that defensive line. Abdul Carter coming off the edge, he had a sack. Zane Durant denied. Dennis Sutton had a forced fumble and knocked the first quarterback out. It was absolute domination by that defensive front, which you would hope to see. The secondary was sticky, and I didn't even get to see, I think, maybe their best secondary members make plays because they just didn't throw to them. AJ Harris was great. Zakee Wheatley was great at safety. Should have had a pick. He dropped it, but was great in coverage, great in run defense. I mean, they were so freaking good. And they need to continue to grow, especially with a big one against Illinois coming up. I'll talk about that game next, or talk about Illinois next, as well as Nebraska. But you guys have to understand, like, if Penn State plays up to their potential, they can beat anybody, including Ohio State. They were that good on Saturday. And I would pick Ohio State to win. I'd pick Oregon to win. That'll bear out in my power rankings if they played today. But I would be scared if I were Ohio State and Oregon. Scared's probably not the right word, but Penn State is good enough to win this league. And with this schedule, you know, USC, I think they're a cut above USC. Again, we'll get to them in a minute. I think they are, maybe a step or two below Ohio State. But you look at Penn State's schedule, their biggest games at USC, at home against Ohio State, and then the rest of the schedule, I'm like, yeah, and Illinois obviously is a big one. I think Illinois is probably their third toughest game. I think Penn State's easily a playoff team. I think they are easily a playoff team at this point. And I think they probably host a home playoff game. They are really good. I think they can compete with anybody in the country right now. If they continue to play the way they are. Running backs are great. Kotelnicki is in his bag, y'all. Like, he is just doing things and just really calling just great game. It called a great game on Saturday. And again, it's Kent State. I know, but just seeing it live, seeing it from the press box, they're legit. Like, they are legit, easily a top 10 team. And I could see them playing their way into Big Ten championship consideration here, like getting into that Big Ten title game. Penn State was great. Check out the article for more thoughts on that. There are things that do concern me about Penn State. The slow starts, my one nitpick of Drew Aller, underthrows. I think he underthrew a couple of his receivers. And if he continues to do that, that's going to be a problem starting this week against Illinois. But Penn State's legit. Let's go to the Friday night game. Illinois defeating Nebraska on the road, coming from behind to win this game. And this game played out a little differently than I expected. I thought that Illinois would struggle to run the ball and that Nebraska would be able to run effectively. Part of Nebraska's rushing numbers are down because of the overtime and the way Raiola took sacks that he couldn't have. But still, you take away his sack yardage, it's 25 carries for I think 100 yards, which is, it's decent. It's not great. Illinois outrushed them even without the sack numbers in there. 38 carries, 168 yards. Josh McCray had some tough yards at the end of that game. And then Caden Fagan in overtime had a couple of big runs, had a big 21-yarder. But man, I've been telling you about Luke Altmaier. I've been telling you he's awesome. Like, he is better than people realize. Great game on Friday, 215 yards, 4 touchdowns, QBR of 83.9. I thought the offensive line really held up well against Nebraska's pass rush. We're seeing that Illinois has maybe the most underrated receiving crew in the conference. Pat Bryant, Zachary Franklin. Those dudes are for real. And I thought Raiola had a couple freshman moments. Someone on Twitter made the point, his biggest freshman moment was when he had to deal with an unchecked blitzer and a free blitzer coming at him. And I was like, well, if that's when your freshman moment's coming, you must be pretty good. I think to pin this game on him and missing the third down on the touchdown pass and then the missed field goal, I don't think it's on Raiola. I think Nebraska maybe wasn't as tough on the offensive line as I thought. Like, I thought they'd be able to run all night on this Illinois front. And I thought that I really thought they'd be able to dominate the offensive line, Illinois' offensive line, with their defensive line. And instead, I wouldn't say anyone dominated, but Illinois really held up in pass protection. And when they needed it, they got the running game going. And so I just thought it was a great game. Like, I think it's a shame that Nebraska dropped out of the poll. This was clearly a game between two top 25 teams. I think both these teams are top 25 teams. I think they're both very good. I think they're going to give multiple teams problems. Like I think Nebraska, they continue their schedule. They play at Purdue. I think Purdue is they're not going to like playing Nebraska, and then you've got a banger with Rutgers, that's going to be a really good game in Lincoln, and again could be a matchup of top 25 teams the way Rutgers is playing right now. Illinois is going to be a handful for Penn State. I know I just got done giving a lot of flowers to Penn State. Hold your horses, because Illinois can exploit some things with Penn State. I think Illinois' receivers are going to be the best that Penn State's faced so far. And while that secondary I thought was sticky on Saturday, this is a whole new level. Pat Bryant, Zachary Franklin, really, really good players. And, Tanner Arkin, I believe is, Dixon, I believe is the tight end. No, Arkin is the tight end. Sorry. He had a really good day against Nebraska, 4 catches, 28 yards, a touchdown. He's going to be a handful. I think that Illinois secondary by far is the best test for Penn State's receiving core, which I think is improved, right? I think they go 4 or 5 deep in that room for Penn State, but the high level talent I don't think is there. Like I think Harrison Wallace is a good receiver. I think Mari Evans is a good receiver. I think Liam Clifford's a good receiver. I think, Fleming is a good receiver. There's no one that maybe screams like an Emeka Ibuka or Makari Lemon or Makai Lemon or Jacoby Lane or anything like that. Zachariah Branch, receivers at Oregon, nothing like that. Dare I say even a Pat Bryant or a Zachary Franklin. This secondary is going to be a real test, and that's where the underthrows for Drew Aller really concerns me. I'll get more into this game on Thursday, but this is going to be a great game. If you're a Penn State fan and you're thinking this is going to be a slaughtering, just prepare yourself now. You're going to feel nervous going into the fourth quarter. You're going to feel nervous. And don't be surprised if Illinois pulls the upset. All right. And to you Illini fans who have been telling me, Luke, I hear you. Bubba, I hear you. I understand that you probably want me to pick against you because I am 0 for 2 in picking against Illinois this year. But they have really surprised and they deserve their flowers. This is a really good football team. Brett Bielema deserves a heck of a lot of credit. Just such a good coaching job. I've said it for months, maybe years. I don't understand why people thought that maybe he was on the hot seat. Brett Bielema can freaking coach, man. And I get last year was rough. I think they had more roster turnover than people realized. I thought the secondary, that really was going to be a problem for them. Illinois is legit. They're really good. I'm going to go really quickly to Ohio State. It was, they're a little flat in the first half. The defense in particular was flat. I thought, aside from the one throw to Jeremiah Smith that got picked, I thought Will Howard played well. And if you're going to throw a pick, it might as well be deep to Jeremiah Smith, who can probably, 50-50 can make a play. So I didn't think it was thrown well. It was thrown more on the inside than the outside. But I thought that Ohio State offensively looked really good. They're going to be a handful for anybody. I do have concerns about Josh Fryer on the right. I'm concerned about his ability to protect Will Howard. I think the defense will be fine. I think they were flat. They had no Tyleik Williams. But similar concerns that I had a year ago and coming into the preseason or coming into the season, I should say, I still have. When they get against better teams, and Michigan State quietly is a better team with a better offensive line, how do they do stopping the run? Do they stay on the field for 5-6 minute drives because they can't stop the run. If they can't do that, if they can't shut down Michigan State, spoiler alert, that's going to be a problem against Michigan. And that's the game they care about. That's going to be a problem against Penn State with Singleton and Allen and those boys. So it's going to be an issue with Oregon. So I think Ohio State, they need to look at that. They have to hope that they were just flat, because if not, bigger problems are coming. So, but I thought my feel is that they were more flat coming off a bye week. I think they'll be fine, but I reserve judgment to see them against Michigan State, where if Michigan State gives them troubles, it might be meltdown and panic mode. Not meltdown, but might be saying, "Hey, this is the same problem we've seen for years, and it's cropped up again." Let me go to USC Michigan. I do want to address real quick the officiating. The officiating sucked. It didn't lose USC the game. Now, I thought the hit where Lemon got sent to the hospital was an egregious miss. And I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a Wolverine fan or a Trojan fan. It was an egregious miss by the officials. It should have been illegal blindside block. That's why that rule is there. I don't generally like that rule, but it's for hits like that. And there's no reason why that shouldn't have been a penalty. That being said, the main issue with this game, like if you go back and you look at what happened, USC, 2 passes on second and third down when they're up 24-20. And I get it. It's 2nd and 8. They're gunning for the run. But then all of a sudden, and you get into 3rd and 13, you don't run a lot of clock, and then you allow Michigan to have a 4-minute offense, which is all they can do because they can't throw the ball. And what do? They not only allow a 4-minute offense for Michigan to win the game, but they cannot tackle. Khalil Mullings with a 63-yard run on 3rd and 1 at their own 20. Like, you just cannot let that happen. And as good as USC has been in terms of improving their defense, that's one they're going to look at the film and like, we controlled our own destiny here, and we blew it. We blew it. Now, I want to give flowers to Michigan. The fact that Sharon Moore was able to gut this out and get this win, it is a big deal. I still have real concerns about this team. I thought the second half showed my concern in that I think their defense is going to wear down in second halves because I don't think they have the defensive depth that they used to. I mean, that defense was just swarming. They were killing Miller Moss. I mean, they were just beating him down. And then all of a sudden, USC's offense had life. Now, part of that I think was adjustments by Lincoln Riley, but I think there was a little exhaustion there too. That's a concern for me with Michigan moving forward. I think another one, you've got to make Khalil Mullings RB1. Like Donovan Edwards, yes, he had a big run for a touchdown, but he is just not the guy. Khalil Mullings is your guy. He's got to be RB1. And then obviously the quarterback situation. Like, good for Alex Orji to get his first win, but that's not going to beat Oregon or Ohio State. They've got to have some threat of a pass game. And if they were to play Penn State in the schedule, they wouldn't beat Penn State either. Now, that's not me saying they won't. I'm saying right now. So there's time. They can get Alex Orji comfortable. I think, the game against Minnesota next week, that's a good game for them to get right. I thought Minnesota would be better than a year ago, or they'd be better than they have been, and I'll get to them in a minute. But they have time. I think the game against Washington is going to be a tough one, but I think they have time. I think they are a little bit better than Washington. I think they'll be able to win that game with their running game and their defense. It's the back half of the schedule that's going to be tough. Having Oregon, having Ohio State, that's where it's going to be difficult. And not just them, at Illinois, at Indiana. Like those are not gimmies anymore. And that those games are going to be tougher for Michigan if you don't have a pass game. I'm not saying they'll lose them, but if you are one dimensional against this, like against four of those teams, you're going to lose a couple. And so, really good. I'm not trying to nitpick, but I'm just trying to give some reality here. You everyone pointing back to the Penn State win a year ago and saying 32 straight runs. Remember, the reason why that worked, one, your offensive line was a lot better. Your defensive depth was absurd. And you had a quarterback who could hit you over the top at any time. And you had better receivers. So just understand this was good against USC. It will not be good enough if you don't improve. But hats off to Sharon Moore for getting the dub. For USC, I've been saying it for a couple weeks now, and I've had Trojan fans either here or on the Big Ten Huddle saying that I was going to eat my words. I picked 27-23 USC over Michigan. So, I mean, I was still picking USC to win this game, and I was wrong on that. But I was right that it was going to be close. I was right that these were two somewhat evenly matched teams. And USC still has problems. Now, I don't think they have structural problems. I think they have talent deficiencies, particularly defensive line, overall defense, a little bit on the on the offensive line as well. They're great at quarterback. They're great at running back. They're great, maybe not great. They're really good at running back. They're great at wide receiver. And they have some really good defensive pieces. But their defense, it reminds me a little bit of 2022 Ohio State. Jim Knowles came in. Everybody thought he fixed the defense, and then they got into bigger games and they realized this defense is not fixed. I think it's actually a similar dilemma. People saying, well, Danton Lynn is fixing the defense. He is. Problem is you don't have the talent that other teams do. You have some good pieces. You have some guys that transferred over from UCLA that are good pieces that know the system. Problem is their talent level taps out at a certain point. That's nothing against them. It's just it taps out at a certain point. And so you have a little bit of a talent deficiency. You have guys still getting used to the system. And then I think we just have to understand their win against LSU continues to look a little Like they're probably a borderline top 25 team. They struggled against South Carolina. They struggled against UCLA in the first half. UCLA is, no offense, Bruins, you guys aren't very good. And LSU, like you guys gave LSU a game in the first half. It's not very good. Gave up 21 to Nicholls State. Like LSU is just, I think they're going to end up like 8-4 or 7-5, which doesn't mean it's a bad win. It's a good win. But just understand you were being ranked off of the strength of that win. And now we're getting more context. And I've been saying since that game, USC was kind of punching above their weight in that game. If LSU kept running the ball, I think LSU wins that game. But Lincoln Riley's a better coach than Brian Kelly. Facts. Just facts. He's a better coach. I don't think USC, I think where the problem is, I think a lot of USC fans after the LSU win thought, hey, we could win the Natty or we could make the playoff. And listen, I had them in my playoff bracket, but I knew in my mind, I'm like, I need to see more before I can really get behind them on that. This game told me a lot of what I needed to know, which is I think they're a dark horse to make the playoff, but most likely they're not. Like they got to play Penn State. On a neutral field, I'd pick Penn State by double digits. Now, they have to travel to USC, so that changes things a little bit. But that's their next tough game. They got to play. Let's see who they got to play here. They get Minnesota or Wisconsin and at Minnesota. Then they get Penn State at home. They travel to Maryland. Maryland can be pesky. They host Rutgers. Rutgers can be pesky. They go to Washington. That's not going to be an easy road game. They get Nebraska at home. Again, I think the trench battle might favor Nebraska there. And then you got Notre Dame. So can USC win the rest of their games? I think so. Like, I think they could. I think they could beat Notre Dame. I think they could beat Penn State at home. Here's my concern. I think Notre Dame and Penn State beat you on the lines. And I think there's a couple other teams that could beat you on the lines too. And so you have to win every game except one from now on to get into the playoff, I think. And I just don't see it. The one exception is that they lose 2 Big Ten games, but then beat Notre Dame, and they could find a way into the Big Ten championship game with, oh no, that wouldn't work. Sorry, scratch that. Forget that I said that. I think a successful year for USC, I'm just kind of resetting expectations, is 9-3. Build towards next year. I think that's really the goal. Because remember, your schedule's brutal. You have a lot of transition, a lot of defensive transition, quarterback transition. I know USC doesn't want to hear that, but I think 9-3 is successful, and anything above that's gravy, right? You get in the playoff this year, then it's a heck of a coaching job by Lincoln Riley. So realize you didn't have the depth along the lines, and that's not a Pac-12 versus Big Ten question. That's a USC has not done a good job at getting guys on the lines the past couple of years. That's a USC problem. That's not a Pac-12 problem. Exhibit A, Oregon. Okay. So I just think that's going to be a hindrance, that along with the defense overall. That being said, I still think USC is a top 25 team, maybe a top 20 team, but I think they're probably a little overranked based on that LSU win. And I think we're going to see that play out a little bit as the season goes on, both with USC and Michigan. I will talk a little bit more about, we'll talk Iowa and Minnesota, and then we'll get to power rankings. Oh no, I want to get to Rutgers and Virginia Tech first. Rutgers almost did like the thing I get upset at Mike Locksley and PJ Fleck for. There's plenty of PJ Fleck frustration coming for those of you who are interested. But they almost gave this game away. They were in real danger of giving this game away. And here's the most frustrating part about it. They could have won this game like 40-7. If you told me before the game that Kaliak Manis would throw for 269 yards, average over 10 yards an attempt, over 10 and a half yards an attempt, and they had a receiver go over 100 yards, I'd be like, Rutgers is going to kill Virginia Tech. They won by 3, and they got lucky. Now, they got lucky, but they shouldn't have had to get lucky. And I think that's where I'm like, I don't know what to make of Rutgers. And I know Rutgers fans have been getting on me and JR saying that we don't know what we're talking about with Rutgers. I hope you guys know. I think Rutgers is a really good team. I think they should be a borderline top 25 team right now. And I think a win at Lane Stadium against Virginia Tech, whose only loss aside from this is Vandy, who Vandy took Mizzou to the wire on Saturday. Like, I think Virginia Tech's not a bad team. But again, looking at, you just look at the drive chart and you realize, Rutgers, it was 14-0, 14-7. Rutgers misses a field goal. That's 17-7 instead of 14-7. And then they fumble at Let's see. They fumble, I believe, at the 4. Sorry, no, they fumble. Yeah, they fumble at the 3-yard line. Now it turns into a safety, but instead of 16-7, it's 24-7. And that's at the end of the half. And then they get a touchdown. It's 31-7. And then they're at the 1, and it's a turnover on downs at the 1. So it's 38-7. Then they missed a field goal. It's 41-7. Should have been 41-7 before Virginia Tech put a touchdown on the board with, 14:06 left in the game. Rutgers cannot afford to play with their food and make these types of mistakes. So here's my confidence. I think Greg Schiano will clean that up. I think he will. But here's my concern. Rutgers is not the type of team that can get away with this week in and week out. I mean, really nobody can, but especially like Rutgers is good enough to challenge and upset some of the better teams in the Big Ten, but they are not good enough to kind of sleepwalk through some of the lesser teams in the Big Ten. Like that's the margin I think that Rutgers has. It's what I say with Iowa all the time. Your margin your margin for error shrinks. I think Rutgers' margin for error is a little bigger because they actually have some competent quarterback play now. Like Kaliak Manis, I think really showed some things. And when Virginia Tech was shutting down the run game, which I think is a big key, they took away the run game and they forced Kaliak Manis to drive down the field. Rutgers, I mean, he did it. And he had Ian Strong. He had Demir Miller. I don't know where Christian Dremel was in this game, but I'm just telling the Rutgers faithful, the team can't do this, especially on the road, especially if you want to get to loftier goals. That being said, big win for Rutgers. Big win for Rutgers to win despite not having their A game. Heck, not even having their B game, right? Running game was subpar. Turnovers, missed field goals. If you told me Kaliak Manis' stats, I'd be like, they would have won by a bajillion. If you told me that they missed 2 field goals, had a turnover on downs, and a fumble in the red zone, I'd be like, Virginia Tech's going to win by 20. And they still won. They still won on the road in a really tough environment. So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Like Rutgers, you can't do that again. And also Rutgers, way to persevere. Longer beam at the end of the game, getting that interception and closing that game out, big deal. Big deal. So I know this kind of sounds like a backhanded compliment, but I'm just saying Rutgers can't do that again if they want to achieve some of their goals, like 9-10 wins. And at the same time, it's a heck of a win. Way to persevere, way to get going, but you better clean that stuff up. So great win for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Let me go to the pig. Florida Rosedale. I know PJ Fleck's buyout is like $22 million. That game is almost a $22 million fireable offense. They're up 14-7 at the half. Had all the momentum. Brosmer, I thought, was playing well. Iowa adjusted. And if Minnesota adjusted, they adjusted into the worst team that I've seen play in a while. I mean, it was awful. You know, Brosmer threw a couple picks. The offensive line couldn't protect. They couldn't run the ball at all. And all the while, they are just letting Caleb Johnson gash them over and over and over again. Yet Iowa has no passing game. McNamara averaged 3.3 yards per attempt in the passing game. He was 11 of 19 for 62 yards. His QBR, by the way, was a dismal 29.3. Caleb Johnson, 21 carries, 206 yards, 9.8 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns. That's the game. Iowa came into Minnesota's yard and beat the brakes off of them in the second half. And it's just inexcusable. Like, Minnesota, you pride yourself on toughness. Where was the toughness tonight or on Saturday night? It wasn't there. Listen, we give Kirk Ferentz a lot of agita, but he's rarely out-toughed. And I get that he's a bit in the Stone Age. I know, Eric, who's come on here from OHIO, he's, made fun of him, and I think there are reasons to make fun of him. His dogged love of his son Brian, and I mean, you love your son regardless, but the fact that he kept him on as OC for as long as he did, his stubbornness with the quarterback situation, all that stuff. But you know what he doesn't do? He doesn't get bullied. He's going to run at you. And now he's got a running back and an offensive line that can really put the pedal to the metal. I've been saying it. Iowa, their offensive line is better than people realize. And that's why all offseason I was saying I think Iowa is a dark horse playoff team. I had Iowa losing this game, but I look at their schedule. I look at what Iowa has in front of them. They have an off week, and then they go to Ohio State. That's going to be a tough game for Ohio State. Like, I'm telling you right now, that will be a true test for Ohio State before Oregon. They do play Washington at home. They go on the road to Michigan State. But then their schedule opens up Northwestern, Wisconsin, at UCLA, off week at Maryland, and then Nebraska at home. Like, 10-2 is still very much on the table for Iowa, even with dismal quarterback play. Minnesota, on the other hand, I look at their schedule, I see how they got just pummeled, and I'm like, Michigan's going to do the same thing to you next week. USC is going to, I think USC might throw the ball all over the yard. You get UCLA, I think that's a win. You get Maryland, I think that's a toss-up. You get Illinois, I think Illinois is the better team there. You get Rutgers, I think Rutgers is the better team there. You get Penn State, I think they're the better team. And I think Wisconsin, Minnesota for the Battle of the Axe might end up being a game either for bowl eligibility or between two teams that won't make a bowl, which is scary because I thought Minnesota had things figured out, but PJ Fleck has a lot of soul searching to do. This was a poor performance, not just a poor performance, poor adjustments, poor game plan, poor execution all around. And I get there are a couple injuries. Justin Wally was out. That was a tough blow. Justin Wally is not the reason why they got bum rushed 24-0 in the second half. Justin Wally is not the reason why they couldn't run the ball for less than 4 yards or for more than 3.8 yards a carry. This is legitimately a bad way for Minnesota. Iowa, on the other hand, I think now has momentum. Again, their only loss is a 1-point loss to a rival that really they should have beat. And so I think their stock starts to rise a little bit. Minnesota's is just sinking. It is sinking hard. I'll go to power rankings and I'll talk about a few other teams there. I'll start lowest to highest. Purdue is 18. Man, I expected so much more out of Hudson Card, but he was almost non-existent against Oregon State. Less than 100 yards passing. You know, their best player on offense was Maccabee, which, to his credit, averaged 10.5 yards a carry. But the reality is Oregon State, they beat them soundly. And Oregon State's not a great team. They won 38-21. I think Purdue's the worst team in the Big Ten. And it's shocking to me because I thought Ryan Walters was going to really right the ship there. 17 is Northwestern. Northwestern without Cam Porter, just not good. Lost 24-5, couldn't get anything going offensively. It was just awful for Northwestern. So like they having Cam Porter will rectify a couple things, but they just have a lot to figure out with the quarterback situation there with Lausch and Mike Wright. UCLA, I have at 16. I bumped them up a little bit because they hung in with LSU for a bit, and I think that's something. I know I said I don't know how good LSU is. Whereas LSU is at least a borderline top 25 team. And UCLA, they adjusted from a week ago. They were tied 17 apiece with LSU at LSU, no less. And, then LSU was finally able to get away from them. But, kudos to Deshaun Foster, who I think is making adjustments, trying to make moves and change some things to help his team get better. That's what coaching is. I still don't know how effective it's going to be because of how young he is as a head coach. But I got to give a little credit there that they stayed within. I mean, they were tied at the half, and then they just didn't have the depth of the gas to keep going. So I have them at 16. Wisconsin was on a bye. I have them at 15. Again, I think them with Braden Locke, I'm concerned. 14, I have Maryland, who the Villanova score is really, it does not indicate how dominant Maryland was in that game. Billy Edwards, 28-32. Ty Felton, man, 14 catches, 157 yards, and a touchdown. I do want to see Maryland do it against someone better before I move them up beyond like that 14 spot. And they'll get a chance. They go to Indiana. I think Indiana is really good, by the way. If you didn't see my video on Curtis Rourke, you should go watch it. Curtis Rourke is a stud. I think he's really good. That's going to be a real test for Maryland as they go on the road to Bloomington. 13, I have Minnesota. I think I honestly could flip Minnesota and Maryland. In fact, as I'm thinking about it, I think I actually, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, why do I have Minnesota ahead of Maryland after what I just said about them? So on my list, I have Minnesota above Maryland, and on the Big Ten Huddle, I have Minnesota over Maryland. I disagree with myself on the show. So Minnesota's at 14, Maryland's at 13. I move them up above Minnesota. I think Minnesota's in a world of hurt right now. 12, I have Michigan State. The Boston College game played out about how I thought it would. I picked 20-17. It was 23-19. Aiden Childs is their best weapon and their biggest poison pill. Like he is dynamic, but he also throws picks at the worst times. The pick he threw at the end of the game didn't need to be thrown. He threw it in double coverage. He had plenty of time to get his team into the end zone. And instead he went for a hero shot. He'll learn. He's young. I think Michigan State actually might be better. I think they might be a little bit better than we thought going into the season. I think they're better along the lines. I think defensively they're a bit better. I don't think Ohio State's going to take them out to the woodshed like they have in the past next week. But Aiden Childs he's got to play more under control and in structure. So I like Michigan State, but I have them at 12. Washington at 11. They suffocated a bad Northwestern offense. They really should be 4-0. They blew the game against Wazoo. And I think they are going to give other teams issues. They play Rutgers next week. I think that's going to be a fun, crazy game, which is ironic because Rutgers is my number 10. Now, before Rutgers fans get on me about this, I like Rutgers. I do. I like them a lot. I just don't know what to make of the Virginia Tech game. I think if Rutgers had come out and actually won 41-7 or 41-14, they're probably my number 7 team, or maybe my number 6 team, at least number 7. And instead, I just don't know what to do with their win over Virginia Tech, because on one hand, I'm like, they beat I think a decent team on the road, but also like they almost gave the game away, and all the momentum was Virginia Tech's way. So I just don't know what to do with it. So I'm keeping them at 10 for now. Let's see what happens against them with Rutgers, because I think, or with Washington rather, because I think they could come out and beat Washington by a couple scores. Well, then I'm probably putting them above a few other teams. Number 9, I have Indiana. I think not Indiana. I have a similar struggle, is that I don't know how good they really are because of who they've played. I will say this: they're doing what a power team should do, which is blow everybody out. Maryland's going to tell us a lot about Indiana next week. Can Indiana continue to kind of pour it on, or is Maryland going to show us that actually Maryland and Indiana are actually similar profile teams? So we'll see. I think in preseason I had Indiana winning that game in preseason. I don't know where I'll pick it. I have my thoughts based on who I trust and don't trust. 8, I have Iowa. I think that running game is legit. It's so good for Iowa. I get that Cade McNamara is not very good, or has not been effective, but that running game and that offensive line it's going to make lives difficult for any team they face, including Ohio State. I think that running game is going to give Ohio State some fits on October 5th. Nebraska at 7 and Illinois at 6. I have them coupled. I think both teams are really good. I think both teams are top 25 teams. USC and Michigan 5 and 4. I have them coupled. I think USC and Michigan are just really close together. And I think there are really good arguments to say that USC should have won that game. They didn't. I think they have themselves to blame for that. And I think they have Michigan to blame for that too, because Michigan took that game. Khalil Mullings took that game and put it on his back. 5 and 4. And then I think there's a significant gap between 4 and 3, and I have Penn State at 3. I know they beat West Virginia, who's a decent team on the road, but then last week was Kent State. I get it, but Penn State's really good. I think they beat every team below them right now by double digits on a neutral field. They're that good. They're learning how to be explosive. The defense is, again, really excellent. Drew Aller is becoming the 5-star quarterback that we thought he would be. So a lot of excitement around Penn State. Oregon's number 2. I think when Oregon is at their best, they beat Penn State on a neutral field, and they beat everybody else. And I think Ohio State, when they are at their best, which was not this week, I think Ohio State could be the best team in the country, which I know I've said year in and year out, except for last year. I didn't say that last year. But in 2021, 2022, I said Ohio State could be the best team in the country. This roster is, I think, the best in the country. The question is, can they coach them up to be that? They've played nobody to this point, and so anyone who wants to comment, Ohio State hasn't played anybody. I know. That's why I'm excited to see them play Michigan State next week, because I think Michigan State has a pulse. I think they have good line play. And while I think Childs is going to throw him a few picks, I think he's also going to just frustrate the heck out of them because of his athleticism and his ability to hit throws, especially if Nick Marsh plays. Like, that's going to be a good test, initial test in conference for the Buckeyes. So that's power rankings. Let me get to my playoff bracket. First four out: Notre Dame, Michigan, Missouri, and Georgia. Missouri has been playing with fire, and they don't have a strong schedule, but they're going to lose a couple, and I think they're going to play themselves out of the playoff conversation. Georgia, I think the Kentucky game is a blip. The problem with Georgia is their schedule, man. They play Alabama next week. I think Alabama's going to beat them, and I think Georgia's going to lose at least two more games. I just, the more I've seen them play, the more I'm like, I think offensively you guys struggle, and I just think they're going to get worn down. They play Texas. I think they play Ole Miss. Their schedule is just brutal. It's brutal. Like Clemson may have been their fourth or fifth hardest game on their schedule. That's how brutal it is. I think Michigan Michigan and Notre Dame have marks against them right now that I think will hinder them in the playoff discussion for two different reasons. Michigan getting blown out by Texas. I think that will not bode well for them right now as I see it. And I think down the road, I think Michigan loses to Oregon, Ohio State. So that's why I have them out. Notre Dame, I just don't know what it's going to be like for them if just with that loss to Northern Illinois. I think they could be 11-1, but then you point, it's like, well, who's their best win? USC, Texas A&M. Like, I think 11-1 might get it done. I think if they lose another, I think they're out. Not definitively, but I would probably say that they're out. And just looking at their schedule and looking at other schedules, I'm like, I think other teams are going to have better resumes, and I think they're going to be left out. Here are my 12. I still have Boise at number 12, getting that group of 5 spot. I just think they're going to win out. I think Oregon's going to have a really good record by the end of the year, and people are going to look at that game and say, wow, Boise went to the wire and probably should have beat the Ducks. They're the team. 11, I have Clemson. Good old Dabo. But they're starting to look like starting to round into form. And the ACC, I think, is Miami, Clemson, and maybe Pitt. Maybe. Like, I just think Clemson is going to probably make the ACC title game and is probably going to be rewarded for that. So I have Clemson at 11. I have Utah at 10. I'm a little concerned about Utah as just with this Cam Rising injury. Sorry, I totally missed an upset here. Hold that thought. I got to change my my pick here. See, I was not paying attention to the rest of the country. I was just paying attention to the Big Ten. I had Kansas State as my Big 12 representative. I just found out they got crushed by BYU at home, 38-9. Helps to do research before the 200th episode, Zach. Good job. All right. Let's try that again. Utah is my number 4 team. Scratch that. I'm going to bump a couple teams up. So I'm going to bump Clemson to 10. Doing this on the fly. I'll put Georgia at 11 right now, because I think people will give them the benefit of the doubt with the schedule. Clemson 10, Ole Miss 9. Ole Miss 9. Their schedule is a little easier, and I think they're gonna go either 10-2 or 11-1. Penn State is my 8th team. Penn State's my number 8 team. I think they are. Again, you guys have heard my thoughts on Penn State. I don't need to go into it again. Oregon, number 7. I think it's very possible that Oregon might be the Big Ten runner-up at this point. I think the Ohio State-Oregon Big Ten championship game, that idea could very, very well be a thing. I have Bama at 6. I have Tennessee at 5. Tennessee with a good win against Oklahoma on the road. And then number 4, I said Utah before I had them at 10. Good job, Zach. Way to pay attention. Number 3, Miami. Number 2, Ohio State. Number 1, Texas. So that's it. That's the week 4 recap. Remember, I'm very grateful for you all. 200 episodes. Thanks for watching. Thanks for giving me grace when I make flubs like the Big 12. Who's the Big 12? Who's leading the Big 12 right now? Not Kansas State anymore. Wow. Bet Kansas State wishes they had Will Howard. No, they don't. Sorry. That's my Ohio State homerness. It's the 200th episode. I get to have a little bit of homer in me today. In all seriousness, guys, I am so thankful that you listen to this, this fan spout off about college football. It's a real joy. Really special thanks again to all of you who have commented over the years. There's so many of you that have given just helpful feedback, and uh, to my guys at the College Huddle, JR, Eric, uh, Larry Crane, TJ Burkle, Kurt from Sky U Pod. There have been so many guests that have been on here. I want to give especially you guys props for the way that you guys have come on and helped out. And Russ at Boiler Express, cannot say enough how grateful I am for you guys. Jim and Chris Ebersol, you guys have been with me since day one. Really appreciate you guys. So thankful. Yankee, so thankful for you and just your constant feedback. Even if you're saying I'm going a little too hard or being a little too homerish against Michigan, to you Illini fans who are, I think, maybe the best fan base that has responded to this podcast. That's no shot at any other fan base. It's just Illinois fans. You guys have been awesome. For giving me grief every time I pick against you. I love the back and forth. And honestly, the Rutgers crew, Sean Morosi, and I'm forgetting so many names, and I'm sorry. Thank you guys. This has been such a blessing. And lastly, I love just how God himself has given me this hobby. So you guys know how I am on this show. I love Jesus, and I've got to give him props because, I probably would have shut this down if not for, him allowing me to have this and use this platform to give me opportunities like this. And it's just a joy. So it's, this isn't anything more than just for fun. So thank you all. Take care. God bless.